All right, so when can you stop saving for retirement? You can see my little co-pilot back there. That's Titan. We are getting ready to drop Titan off as I get ready to take a trip to Florida. So anyway, waiting for the place to open up. So when can you stop saving for retirement? Well, here's a couple of age benchmarks I want to point out for you. And again, I just want to clarify, these are benchmarks. They're goals. If you can get there, that's great. Uh, just it doesn't include a lot of things that I'm going to talk about here in a minute, but these are some goals and stuff to shoot for. And since most of the people that watched my channel so far are in the 40s, 50s, 60s, I'm not going to give you stuff where you should be if you're 30 and 35. However, that number is basically at that range is lower than what we're going to talk about today. But if you're 45, your benchmark should be somewhere between 2.5 times and 4 times your salary you should have saved and put away. As you get up to 50, you want to be looking at 3.5 to 5.5. At 55, 4.5 to 8 times as much of your yearly salary. And at 60, you should be somewhere between 6 and 11 times your yearly salary. And of course, at 65, it's as much as you can have, right? Because the average age, the standard age, is going to be that they base a lot of these numbers on is based on being 65 and people retiring. However, if you are looking to retire early, I would just move those numbers ahead a few years, and then you should be right in the ballpark. So if you want to retire 55, if you're shooting for 8, which is like the high end of 55 to be ready to retire later, and 11 times should put you in a range where you can retire at 55 if that's what you want to do. Just keep in mind that these numbers are based on goals and benchmarks, and therefore they do not include anything that might be part of your wages, which is what I wanted to talk about to go with this, because it does not include pension, for instance. It does not include Social Security, for instance. This is just money that you should have tucked away in a 401k or other investments aside from those issues or those add-ins. Now, if you don't have any of those, you don't have a pension, for instance, that can come to you before 65 or at least before 62, the early Social Security age, then you better have at least, I would guess, the top end of this number. For those of you that do have pensions, like I do, my pension is going to be worth approximately $50,000 a year until 65. And then it changes because I'll drop down to my forever pension number plus Social Security. But that's worth 50 times 5, which is, $250,000 added to what I'll have in my 401k by the time I retire, equals somewhere in that range of 6 to 11 times my salary, because the first 5 years of my retirement, I'm going to be living off my pension, not touching and needing to have my 401k balance any higher. And so here's some other ranges that you can look at, especially if you're closer to retirement like I am. And these are numbers based on how much you make a year and how much you should try to put away based on the age brackets we're going to talk about. If you're married and you are 55, you need to be at 5 times your income before you consider getting retired. And if you make 150, you should aim for 6 times by the time you're 55, 6 times your income. So 6 times 150, that's a pretty good chunk of change, right? That's 600 grand, 750, sorry. If you're 200 or make 200 grand, then you need to be looking at 6.5 times that amount. And those numbers then go up. Every 5 years, it goes from, like, for the 100G people, from 5 times your salary to 7 times. When it goes to 65, you should have at least 9 times. If you're 150, it goes from 6 times at 55 to 8 times at 60 and 10 times at 65. So you can use those numbers to kind of gauge where you are now and then where you want to be when you retire. So if you want to retire early, right, and the estimated number for you to have at 65 is 10 times your income and you want to retire at 60, then you need to have close to that amount at 60. Just bump up your savings. So one of the things that you can think about when you're doing this math and trying to figure this out, how much do I have? Am I close to the margins or close to the goals? Try to increase your savings over time. You don't have to do it automatically in a big jump right away. That's where a lot of people make mistakes, is they think it's an all or nothing. It's not. If you're putting 5% away, if you can slowly work up to 10% and then eventually to 15%, you're right on target. 15% a year, starting at any age, is a great target to aim for, to get you to these numbers by the time you turn 60 and 65 without having to worry about the money. Because if you put 15% of your salary away, no matter what you make, and start early enough, 25, 30, you've got plenty of years of compounding interest to make that number work. 50% is good, okay? If you can jump it up earlier, then do it earlier. And especially if you're on the last 5 or 10 years of your working years, if you've got the extra money, you should be putting more money away. You need to plan for this retirement and have as much in your nest egg as you possibly can get together. Only because it never hurts to have too much money, right? There's really not such a thing as too much. You're just going to have more left over. All right. And then the last thing I would advise anybody to do is, if you're over 50, take advantage of the catch-ups that we're allowed to have. It's a good way to capitalize on that, and you can put more money away. It's tax deferred. Otherwise, put more money away in other areas if you don't want to have the tax deferment, because I do realize that when all your money's in tax deferments, you're going to have to pay tax on that money at some point, and it's going to be when you're starting to take it out. The idea is that you start taking it out when you're making less. So if you take 15 grand a year out of your 401k, but you're only making 50 grand, your total income being taxed is only 65. Well, if you make 80 and you take the tax deferment and take money out then, it's going to be a higher amount. So the more money you take out every year is going to obviously affect your tax rate. So a lot of people and people I've talked to, especially that I've worked with over the years, did the same thing I'm kind of doing now. The last few years, they kind of switched up the money a little bit and put more into high yield savings and money markets and that kind of thing, so that they had cash available and had it saved after tax. That way they always have their emergency fund is in cash available, no tax income. Anyway, that's all I got today. I appreciate you watching. We'll see you next time.